Welcome everyone, thanks for joining. The session is being recorded and will be shared with attendees afterwards. If you have questions, submit them via the Q&A during the presentation. We'll review the questions at the end, and if we don't get to yours, we will email you afterwards. If you're watching this via the recording and have questions, please email them to info@buzzback.com. I'd like to introduce Silvana Milenkova. Silvana joined Buzzback in 2006 and brings over 10 years of supplier-side market research experience. She has a versatile background conducting both qualitative and quantitative research in a variety of industries and specializes in early-stage product development, decision-making, and communication research. Silvana has designed and implemented numerous large-scale, complex international studies that employ advanced analytics such as conjoint, segmentation, and other multivariate research methods. Fluent in 5 languages and an experienced global researcher, she holds a postgraduate political science degree from Columbia University. Silvana, please go ahead.
Thanks, Matthew. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. What we'll talk about is a little bit around how a client of ours named Lando Frost updated their expectations as well as knowledge of the consumer journey and how they did that in a mobile context, and most importantly, why they did that and how that may relate to other categories besides the one they were in. But just a quick intro on us. I know some of you may not be as familiar. We are a research company that has been around for over 20 years, and for most of those 20 years, we've occupied the innovation space, and we've helped companies work throughout each of the stages of innovation. And a lot of the work we really do is in those early stages of understanding the needs, looking at where the consumer is, and bringing them kind of along with us as we ideate, as we find white space. And as I said, a lot of our work focuses on the consumer, looking at them as full human beings and trying to really understand all of the various components of how they live their lives and make decisions. So not just what they're doing and telling us they're doing, but also how they're feeling, what are some of those emotions that maybe are somewhat harder to articulate, as well as what's happening around them, what's their environment. And that really helps us identify kind of the benefits and the barriers, the pain and the gain, if you want, that push and pull between them, and how that then allows our clients as well as us to find white space to keep pushing forward new innovation. The way we've done this traditionally has been through a set of techniques. Some of them we've developed ourselves, others we've borrowed from psychology, psychiatry, qualitative or quantitative research as well, and even in some cases from the gaming industry. The idea here really is to be with people, the ways that they're interacting with the world, and make research a part of that experience and not a test they have to take. Today we'll focus on mobile. So as you see here, some of these techniques are very mobile forward, but we do have others or different applications for some of these. The whole idea really being that we want to reach people in ways that they want to be reached, be that through imagery, be that from implicit, looking kind of at the things that are happening or how quickly they're making decisions, or even putting them in situations that allow them to project onto somebody else or some other experiences. I'll talk a bit about our client who is the case study. You may not know the name, but they are a lunch meat producer. They're the 3rd largest one in the US. You may have seen their products more than the company name. They started in the 50s and they're still family owned. And they started actually after identifying an opportunity for a need that people had for frozen meat. Fast forward from there, now they have the 2nd biggest bacon brand in the US, have a variety of brands for different needs and different types of people, as well as are still family owned and still kind of have that local presence and are involved with a lot of local causes, ranging from kids to adults and the elderly. These are some of their brands. And the idea here is, for us to really understand where they fit and how people are relating to them and where they're using them. As you can see, they have brands that range from really high end and more specialized to things that are maybe for families and have to appeal to everybody, as well as specific categories. But most importantly, why we are kind of talking about mobile and what people were trying to do is really understanding how the world has changed. And the world has been changing for a while. We've all talked about how mobile phones are everywhere, how in some developing nations, they are the first device people have and have totally bypassed and surpassed laptops and other computer devices. But it is at the stage where almost 80% of the world population is mobile. It's part of life. It's totally automatic. People do it all the time. It's very intimate because we have everything on our devices. And it is behavioral and implicit because we're kind of doing all of these things day in and day out. So for us, it really was trying to understand where we are in that process and also trying to figure out where research would fit in it and how the world is going to continue changing. So many people are talking about looking at reviews on their phones or using shopping apps on their mobile devices, over 70%. Not surprisingly, that also has led to increase in time. Many people are talking about 4 hours of time on their phones for adults, not that much far behind for children. And people who are actually tracking this, like eMarketer, are looking at year-over-year increase in not what we're calling non-voice cell phone usage, but also the amount of time people are spending doing so. And yes, you know, when you look at these numbers, we're seeing a bit of an increase or a bigger increase during the COVID pandemic, but the expectation is that this will continue, and it will continue to either be similar or even increase as the years progresses. So that is something that obviously as researchers, as people working with consumers, we're trying to keep a pulse on. And what are they doing on these phones? I mean, it's varying, right? There are a lot of things around social media, around sharing content, around messaging, talking, but also, you know, interacting with others, like gaming and participating in events, especially, you know, in the past few months and years. And for us, that really has led to us trying to be there in that moment and have you know, a research mobile philosophy, if you will, that kind of matches what people are doing. So people are always on, we have to be always on. Content gets shared, opinions and ideas get exchanged 24 hours a day. We're always kind of interacting with people in the same way. That kind of ladders up to this idea of being interactive and in the moment. We are really big and keen on understanding what people are doing when they're doing it and how they're feeling or why they're feeling the way they're feeling in that moment versus asking them, you know, a week, a month, 2 months later and having that removed experience. We know humans are very good at rationalizing and explaining things. So we're kind of trying to get closer to that moment when things happen versus, you know, kind of retelling it and trying to re-engineer what we think happened or why we think it happened. It's inherently implicit because we are able to not only hear what they're doing and saying, but also see how fast or how they're doing it and what that really means, especially in categories like the case study today, but also a lot of our clients, we are looking at that kind of impulsive opinion, impulsive behavior. And it is contextual. We need to know what else is happening. And we also get to know some of the things that we don't have to ask, right? Where they are, what they're doing. We can actually ping them in specific locations and time how long they're doing things without having to ask them to recall it and kind of rely on their either memory or experience. And, you know, it is a very good way to kind of bridge this gap between what people are saying and what people are doing. In research, we're always kind of trying to read between the lines and understand why things are happening and not just what's happening. So having some of that contextual information and having the opportunity to do so and marry that maybe with more traditional either surveys or other, you know, research methods has been something that we've been trying to focus on as part of providing that consumer closeness and the 360 view of the people we're talking to. What the context looks like may vary. For us, it is a couple of things and probably others as things evolve. But we are looking at where people are, like pinging them in the moment when they're doing something, Also looking at what else they're doing, what apps they're using, what are some of those behaviors, how long they're spending there, what features are more relevant or not, and also kind of layering on passive information. So we don't need to ask them what they've bought or where they've bought it, how often they've bought it. We already have some of that information through either receipts or scan data or additional kind of information sources in like the passive data realm. So again, the whole reason for all of this is to be able to really understand the whole experience in this case, or the whole person that we're trying to, paint a picture of. And it is important, especially when it comes to, shopping and like trying to figure out this journey that we were on with our client, because people are really looking for that opportunity. We know about 60% are saying, oh yes, having a mobile ability to shop online is a very important thing for my decision to buy something. And as a result, a lot of projections are going in the direction of grocery sales becoming, 250 billion in the next 3 to 4 years. So we are expecting this to continue. We have always kind of tried to be cognizant of, what else is happening in the world, pandemic being one of them, and also different kind of disruptions from a technology standpoint. But it is something that we're seeing a pent-up demand for, and we're seeing people still continuing to explore and participate in. And it's not just us, this is Google Trends. They're looking at kind of searches. And one of the things that, I will call out here, that I want you to kind of park for later when we look at the case study, is this idea of ordering online, picking up in store. Those searches have increased over 700% for Google, and people are trying to figure out which apps to do that through and how they can incorporate a mobile component to their shopping. Grocery store apps, and Walmart is one of those leads in there, are really in the forefront of that, and people are looking for those kind of opportunities to help them, incorporate mobile shopping to their trips and to their shopping. And for us, that is kind of what the fodder was for the work we did with our client. We wanted to kind of do it multi-phase. So we looked at, people in the US. We did 2 separate tracks. There were people who were at home taking kind of your more traditional shopper journey, if you will. The idea there was to see what they're doing as part of their general routine, how they're preparing, what is the thought process there. But we also had a component which was a geofenced in-store at the moment they were shopping. And the idea was to kind of compare and contrast the two, but to also really have understanding of that holistic shopper journey, and not just put it, after the fact or the planning stage or at the moment. So we're kind of trying to triangulate all of these. And we asked them, things like what's changed, how they go about it, what are they looking for, are the different expectations or benefits varying if you're at home when you're kind of planning, or if you're in the moment at the store. We also always focus on understanding the whys behind the whats. So we ask people to kind of narrate and tell us, why they did the things they did, how they approached it, why they chose one, channel versus another, or even how they perceive the shopping experience, and what were some of those key drivers that made them pick, Land of Frost or somebody else, and the context around that. So when we looked at how people shop, and we've talked about e-commerce, for the past 5-6 years, I have clients coming and say, oh, we need an e-commerce strategy. It's the most important thing we're working on. And then it kind of goes on the wayside. We focused on it, and it's like, yeah, but it's only a couple of percent. Well, Land of Frost and the category, but also a lot of our other clients in similar categories, have experienced 3, 4, 5 times the amount of e-commerce than they did, let's say, 2-3 years ago. And yes, COVID has been a part of that, but the change in the growth has been exponential. And we're seeing that here with people, ordering online and picking up at like 15 to the 20% range. We're not looking at the 5 to 6, 7% anymore. And we think part of that is because the shopper journey has become a bit more complicated. It's not, one or the other anymore. And I like this chart because, for one, it's complex, but what it actually shows us is how people are going about it and how much the online component has become part of the process. So even if they're shopping in store, front to end, they're still doing research online and looking at different things, either coupons or what they've purchased or what else they can purchase before showing up. Once they show up in the store, they sometimes are still pulling out their phones and looking either at apps or other things to understand what else is available, where else it may be available, or even like what they would do with the product they would purchase. And it doesn't end there. Even after a purchase is made, people were still going back to kind of an online digital experience to figure out, did I like it? What did I do with it? And some of the things that we're seeing now is that people are bored. They're looking for something new to do. And there were a lot of people talking about how they went and looked at what can they make that's new and different with the product they bought. So even looking for ideas or looking at the manufacturer, have you considered this, or you may also like that, has been a really big important part of the process. So the process is more interrelated, it's more blended. It's not a linear thing. I go to the store and these are my steps I take, or I just do it online and it shows up in my house. So again, for us and for our client, this was a very important learning because it allows us to think of how we need to position and what we need to do at multiple parts of this process in multiple media, not just in store, not just online, not just for apps. And another thing that kind of supported this was really the idea that people were doing larger shopping trips when they're purchasing online. They're not picking up one or two items that they need or they're missing. And it wasn't only driven by price, actually convenience and kind of simplifying things for them and having some of their information already there and helping them not have to start from zero were even more important than some of like the coupons and price savings that we've typically come to expect from an online experience. Behaviors have changed, I won't belabor that, but it is again this idea of looking at multiple components, the sale, the convenience, maybe buying more things, maybe buying different things, maybe being exposed to things that they're perceiving either higher quality or more interesting or different than what they typically buy through those online e-commerce channels. And I talked a bit about passive data, right? How we can actually contextualize that without having to ask everything. And this is, an overlay we did here where it supports the things that people are telling us for the most part. They are buying more than a couple of items. They are doing big shopping trips. They're not just doing small ones. And some of them were even buying more than one package, in this case, of lunch meat, right? So they were buying different things. They were trying to figure out how they can incorporate them into their routines. Interestingly, we always worry about, what people do and say, right? So in this category, and it's not the case for all of them, but here, when we looked at the purchase drivers that people identified at home when they were just talking about their general behaviors and kind of in a more traditional survey environment, and the ones they identified in the moment when they were in the store looking for lunch meat in that moment were very much aligned. So they were still things around the variety, the taste, the convenience, the ingredients. Where we saw a little bit of a difference was those who are at home and kind of thinking more removed from that situation were focused on some of the kind of more rational, if you will, or rationalizable aspects of the benefits. So the brand was a bit higher. They were looking for things that are more kind of expected or things that we talk about in terms of benefits, like being healthier or being innovative. So the things that they kind of had to think through more, or kind of the more expected conventional answers, came back a little bit higher when they were doing it at home. But for the most part, the drivers for this category were very aligned when people were in the moment and when they were maybe kind of somewhat removed from it. And here is kind of how they talk about this. This was part of the video that we wanted to have an overlay to bring the consumer voice, but also kind of see how are they navigating, what are they saying? And this is just an example of that, but you will see it's very consistent with what we saw throughout both of the exercises.
For the grocery store, I usually go right to the deli aisle. I like to get, that stuff first. I use my phone really only for, that's a grocery list. I prefer Boar's Head and Hillshire Farms. You know, the good brands. I like when they're pre-cut and stuff like that. I'll go up to the counter most times, but if I'm in a bit of a pinch, I'll get the stuff that's pre-packaged. You know, I like Boar's Head for all the meats, turkey, ham, stuff like that. But for like packaged stuff like bologna, I like more Oscar Mayer.
So here you're kind of seeing again the idea of the brand and the idea of some of those kind of specific benefits they're looking for coming through that kind of line up very closely with the drivers that they were kind of responding to. And when we looked at kind of what they were shopping for, these are pictures they shared as part of that shopping experience. We also kind of check that against not only what they said in that home survey, but also in terms of the passive data and also other data that our client obviously collects as part of their tracking. And, you know, it was very closely aligned once again. The top brands were the top brands. We had some, in this case, Boarheads, going more in the deli because that's kind of where they reside. So again, there was a lot of alignment between what people were saying and what they were doing and what kind of we're expecting in terms of from like a bigger category perspective. But one other thing that we've been seeing related to this kind of blending of the online and the e-commerce kind of being part of this whole experience is this idea of apps. And we talked about them a little bit before. It is something that we constantly are looking at and something that's increasing because it is an easy way for people to start that journey and to use throughout different parts of the journey. Similar numbers are doing it in the store and at home for mostly similar reasons. It's not like, you know, in the store it's only for A and at home it's only for B, but there were a couple of nuances. We did see that a lot of people are pre-planning their actual in-store trips at home through the app and able to kind of look at where things are located. So it was almost this idea of like, I know I need A, B, and C. If I'm in a big supermarket or a big shopping center, where in the aisle or which aisle would that be for? And then what else may be around there so I can kind of get some inspiration again. So again, that was something that is helping us understand how intertwined those experiences and those journeys are. Which apps they're using, I don't think this is super surprising. Walmart was kind of on its own, but then we also have other retailer apps of people going to the stores. But interestingly enough, almost as similar number of people are using some of those couponing apps, like Ibotta and coupons. That is also part of that whole thing of like, I am pre-planning, but in the moment, I'm also going to check and see if something else on sale or what else is there or where else I may be able to find this. So like, what happens to the rest of us who are not maybe in the lunch meat category or maybe not even the grocery store? There are some things that we're seeing that I want to kind of bring your attention to in terms of universally happening. And some of those are obvious. So yes, smartphones are here to stay. They probably will keep increasing, but they are here for everything. It's not just for fun. It's not just for high involvement categories. It's everything from gum to lunch meat as well. The idea of shopping and using apps to do so is continuing to grow and will continue to be something that we'll keep a pulse on. But it will have implications in terms of what apps are developed, where people are going, and how they're interacting with those apps, but also with the brands behind them. This idea that the journey is not one or the other, there are multiple touch points and they could be both digital and in person, is important for a lot of our clients, and what we're trying to kind of help them understand and is how to be more present in each of these stages and what that may look like for their brand, for their values, for their propositions. And then this idea that most of the time we're seeing synergies and probably good alignment between what people are looking for and what they said they were looking for is important for us because that also helps us better understand and position. Again, context is a lot of this. We don't have to ask every single question to people, no matter where we're asking them. We have the opportunity now from mobile to layer on different things and to find people in the right places without having to send them there, but also to know what else they're doing and how long they're spending doing it without relying on them, and also making the survey experience a lot more engaging and streamlined for them. And then like some overall takeaways of like where we can take this, right? So we're looking at first understanding. Who are these people? What are they doing? The lunch meat consumer may be a little bit different than yours, but at the core of it, it's good to figure out like what they're about and how they relate to the category, how that's evolving and where it's going. Personalization is key. A lot of the experience is targeted because we now have the opportunity to do so, especially with some of those digital overlays, and people are expecting that. They're used to it from the ones who are doing it successfully, and they're continuing to look for that from other brands. There was just some research released about a month ago. It talked about, the top 75% of e-commerce sales are within like 25 companies. So there are very few who are doing it successfully, but they are taking the lion's share. So there probably is an opportunity for others to step into that space. When we're talking about developing, we're talking about building that relationship, strengthening it, being in multiple touch points that allows us to then increase obviously sales, but also brand loyalty. There's a lot of talk throughout the past years about these micro moments of how brands need to be more present for small amounts of times, but more frequently than one long engagement. And I think that this is a very good opportunity for that. And then expanding, D2C is a huge thing right now. We're working very actively to kind of expand that experience and make it even more integrated. And that usually is helpful, but you have to still close the loop. You still have to be there at the end. So once that either purchase or experience has happened, how do you really keep them engaged? How do you have them give you a positive review? How do you have them take the next thing, that recipe or that interaction that you want them to continue coming back, but also have that holistic journey that we talked about? Because they are going to go online, they are going to do something, and the idea is to have them do it in a way that benefits your brand and continues that engagement for the next occasion or the next product. So that is all I have for today. I'm happy to take questions if there are any. Matthew.
Thank you so much, Silvana. Yes, we do have a few questions that have come in. So the first person asks, can we build the connection qualitatively and quantitatively between the in-store and online journey?
Yes, definitely. And, it's a very interesting question because sometimes, I have seen this research being done purely qualitatively, and it could be done, traditionally, and then maybe in store more as a shop along, or kind of this blended approach that we took here, where we had quite a few people participate, but we still asked them, to share videos, to share photos, to explain their experiences, to participate in some projective exercises. So definitely we can make the connection. And the more we can make the connection and using, the qualitative information to understand some of the whys and the hows and the whatnots, I think is just as important. And for us, it's always been a priority, because it's one thing to understand the process. It's another thing to understand why things are happening the way they are and how we can maybe either improve them or be part of them. So for us, it was always about combining, the traditional, if you will, and the in-store, and kind of using whichever techniques and approaches we needed to get there. But yes, you could also consider having a purely qualitative and kind of blending those together. And depending on where in the process, it may be, the best place to start.
Thank you. I think you may have touched upon this, but someone's asked, do the findings apply universally to other categories, e.g. OTC?
Good question. From the perspective of looking at this idea of people having a more intertwined journey and thinking of how digital and e-commerce will play a part in it, yes. I think people are a lot more comfortable, able, and willing to do it that way. So from that standpoint, yes, when I showed you kind of that somewhat messy consumer journey with the mobile coming in and out and in different places, I think that is happening in many, many categories we see, and I think OTC is one of them, where there may be nuances, and that's kind of where we need to take it on case-by-case basis, is around like the drivers or the expectations. because we know that as higher involvement the category, some of that kind of rational thing becomes even more important, but there also could be some opportunity for education. It's not as, second nature to people to go and interact with OTC or even technology or financial services, for example. So in that case, there could be additional layers that we may have to look at to really, peel all of the experience expectations, but also some of the things that, kind of between what people are doing and saying.
Okay, thank you. Someone has asked here which markets we can apply these approaches in.
You can probably do a lot of what we showed here in a lot of the markets where mobile phones are available, which, as we saw, is pretty much everywhere to a very large proportion. I think where it could become trickier is in categories or maybe audiences which are smaller, because there's still kind of prioritization in like the developed markets in terms of being able to reach these people and ping them. But there are many ways to do it. It doesn't always have to be geofence. So you have different opportunities in different markets. And I would expect that to keep increasing given kind of, where the world is going in general with the mobile phones.
Thank you. And one more question. How can you influence behavior and drive salience pre-shop, whether online or in store?
So that for us, and for a lot of our clients has been kind of the $1 million question, right? Because we're all kind of trying to be in more touch points than we've been before. I think it starts with what we covered today, but maybe for your brand or for your category or for your audience, really being able to understand where they're at and what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then mapping that to what your brand strategy is, how your brand portfolio, but also values and experience can help address some of those things and meet them in that moment, meet them at the time that they're making the decision maybe, or have them have an experience that helps them really triangulate what they purchased and why they bought it and how they used it. And thinking about those moments and those needs and expectations people have. And being very strategic in terms of how you approach them is probably the best way to go about it. It is a multifaceted process because it's not the same answer of what you would do in, like, say, the pre-shopping to the end, but it's more integrated now, and understanding that and being able to break it down and marry it with your strategy will be probably the key there.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for joining. That's all we have time for now. So thanks to Silvana for the presentation and answering everyone's questions. Before we go, we'd love to see you at Quirks New York if you are US based or planning to see the show otherwise. We'll be on stand 334 where you can come and say hello, and also excitingly enter for a chance to win a study and try us out. We have another webinar coming up on the 9th of December where we'll be sharing some insights around data privacy and consumer attitudes towards that. So something that's very close to us all as researchers and consumers. Actually quite relevant to what we've talked about today. We hope to see you there. Thanks for joining. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Silvana.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.